Anyway, I find that this station, both at work and previous work and at home here, is probably the best way to go. You don't have to necessarily have a variable temperature, but the main thing to have is make sure that it's tight, because you won't transfer the heat to the tip if this isn't tight. So that's basically the first thing you want to address. And then after that, you have a sponge that has water in it, so you can actually clean off the tip so it's clean. And typically you want to tin it using 6040 or 6337 solder, and you just tin it and get a bit on there so it'll conduct good. After that, basically whatever you're going to solder, if you're going to solder this wire for example, some already comes tinned, which is what I prefer, but sometimes you have copper wire, and after a while, even when it's in the sleeve, it can oxidize, so it's good to take some emery cloth and just brighten this up. And once it's brightened up, then you can basically get a better flow. And when I'm soldering one item to another item, I like to actually have solder on both pieces. So we'll start by heating this up and tinning this. And if I was soldering it to this connector here, I would apply the heat and then let the solder start to flow until I see it making. And then once it's made, then I let go. When you're working with transistor circuits, which might be on a PC board, ICs, etc., it's good to get in quick and get out quick, because you don't want to burn up the IC. So this here's soldered here. Another wire here. Oh, here it is here. So again, you can just sort of come in once both of them are tinned. You can come in and just heat up the solder there, and then bring this in like that and let go, and boom, there you go. And conversely, if you were doing another wire, if this was a speaker jack, for example, now there's a couple kinds of strippers too. This one here I find works quite well for almost everything, and it goes from 22 to 12 gauge. So you might set it on 18 or 20 gauge here and pull it off. Now, the little trick I have when I'm working inside something like this, or at work, when I got wires that are 1.5 inches long and I'm trying to hold them and strip them, what I do is I put the stripper on like so, grab a pair of right angle pliers and go like that. That just makes it a lot easier. The other way of doing stripping of wire is with one of these ideal strippers. And I found that in the process of doing shielded cables, none of these others, and even ones that look similar to this brand, just won't take off tough jackets off of shielded cables. But this one worked perfectly. So
what brand is that?
This is Ideal.
Oh, okay.
Strip Master. So typically about an $85 unit. So, but so then we'll just this one here I haven't taken the emery cloth to, but we'll see if it'll tin. Electrical wire, man, it can oxidize inside. But see, it's not really doing much. It's doing a bit, but not what you'd like. So if you again strip it, doesn't matter what. A little more difficult now. They got some solder on there, but anyway. Now we bring it back down here, and there it is. It's tinned. Boom. And again, I would, just so you're not trying to fight to heat up the thing and solder at the same time, clean the tip and tin the inside here. Not to the point where it's going to start melting the connector, but, and then come in again with the iron, and there you go. Boom. So you have your connector soldered. with good strength. And it's important to, well, with these connectors you can put this on afterwards as long as you haven't already done the other end. And then you can just put the chuck on. Depending on the size of wire, etc., etc., the Nutri connectors come with a breakaway, so it'll go further in, so you can tighten it more on the boot and the end of the connector. So that's basically a Nutri NP2C mono 2-pole connector. Doing XLRs, you might have another jig or even a mixer handy. You just plug the connector in so it's holding it, and you tin the 3 and do the same process. Other than that, that's about the extent of it. So when you're going to splice the wire, give yourself enough that you can actually get it to have a number of turns. Typically, I think it's called a lineman's splice. I think they turn them about 7 times. But so again, you can you're probably not going to tin them first this time, because you want to be able to have it flexible enough that you can just twist them and twist them and twist them until you have a decent join. It's got some strength to it. And then, even though I didn't take the oxide off of these, it may take a bit more heat to get it, but once it's cooled down, if you have some heat shrink, which is advisable so things don't short out, you can put a piece of heat shrink over it, and either with a match or a lighter or with a heat gun, if you have it in your tool kit, you can then seal that so it won't short against anything, and you're good to go. So that's a few tips on soldering.
Awesome.
See, you can use solder wick. This is something we use a lot at work, and here something that's come up at work is, and I think I had this right from the start, this stuff oxidizes too. So now what we're going to do at work, when we buy it, we're going to put it in a sealed plastic bag, and I've said that we should put one of those moisture bags inside it too, because already you can see the difference in the color from this dull to this shiny. You know, we just never thought that, you know, this stuff would have an age type of thing, but typically it does. But here it should flow, boom, just like that on there. So conversely, when you're trying to remove something, it'll flow nicely. Whereas if I come back here and try to solder on it, it's not too bad. I might have got some on it, but at work we're finding that it's just not taking the solder because of the oxide. So that's an important thing. Another item we have at work that somebody might invest in, this is basically a manual solder sucker. So you have your parts down there, and you have to replace, if you're going as far as replacing parts, you know, mixer, etc., etc., then you heat up the solder with the iron and you just suck up the solder. But it's okay in some cases. But there is an item that looks like a soldering gun, like this. This is another way of soldering. I've soldered in ICs with something like this, but you got to be quick, you know, just right on the thing. But it looks like this, but you come down to it and it has a hole in the end, and you go, and it sucks the solder off. And again, you got to be careful, because some of these little traces are small, and if you get in there too long, it's like, oh, there goes my trace. Now you got to rebuild the PC board in that place. So that can be a problem that we run into on occasion, but we do have the means to rebuild traces on PC boards. So anyway, that's there's other things. These oxidize as well. The big light strips, I like using them for building because they're very handy. And you don't have to use a PC board.